Are you guys ready?
Ready.
I'm ready.
Cool.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Talk the Talk, RTR-FM's weekly show about linguistics, the science of language. For the next hour, we're going to be bringing you language news, language origins, and some really great music. Maybe we'll even hear from you. My name's Daniel Midgley. I'm here with Ben Ainsley.
Good morning.
And Kylie Sturgis.
G'day, everyone.
On this episode, we're talking about a controversial new paper about how new languages get started. Are Creole languages different from other languages? How do they start? And what does all this mean about the human language ability? We're going to talk to the author on this episode of Talk the Talk.
We're going to be talking about Creoles and how they get started and how they differ from other languages. But before we do that, we need to find out what's going on in the world of linguistics in the week gone past.
Something kind of sad is happening. Something is closing
In this
down.
world? Now?
Yeah,
No.
I'm afraid so. It's the DARE, the Dictionary of American Regional English.
Why is it closing down?
Well, for lack of funding.
Oh.
I guess the funders thought that it had gone on long enough because this thing is older than me. Kylie,
And that's super old.
shut up. I found out about this because of an article in the New Yorker by Jesse Shieldauer, which is really good, and we'll have a link on our blog, talkthetalkpodcast.com.
It started in 1965, and they had linguistic graduates and recorders, and they were going out in order to find out about maybe 1,000 communities, and they had massive reel-to-reel tape recorders back in the day. Remember how you used to have those sorts of things? And they had a total of 2.3 million answers, and it was the idea, and I'm quoting directly here, is document the words, phrases, and pronunciations that vary from region to region in the United States.
Are you ready to play a game?
Yes.
Yes!
Is it a competition as well as a game?
Can be.
Yeah!
I'm going to read an item in the Dictionary of American Regional English, and I'm going to give you three choices. You have to guess the right choice.
Okay.
Easy one first.
Okay.
What do you do with a bear claw? Do you eat it, wear it, or use it in the fireplace?
You eat it.
Eat it.
It's a delicious pastry.
Yes.
Very nice. 1-1. If someone is nebby, are they drunk, are they nerdy, or are they nosy?
I think the last one.
Nosy.
They're nosy?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Nosy.
Okay, you're both on 2.
Yes.
Very nice.
We enjoy our American literature.
All right, well, we're going to get a little tougher, and this one is from my Northwest U.S. English. When you hooky bob,
Daniel, I'm certain you're not allowed to do that on the radio.
what do you need? A fishing line, a car, or a frying pan when you hooky bob?
When you hooky bob. I reckon the fishing is a red herring, pun definitely intended.
Hooky bob.
So I reckon that's not the case. I reckon it's a car, something to do with towing something.
Frying pan.
When you hooky bob, you need a car.
Yeah! What is it? What is it? What is it? What is it?
What do you do?
what you do
it's
is-
not when you get a baseball bat and smack like a letterbox, is it?
No, it's not that.
Oh,
What we
good.
used to do this as kids, and it's super dangerous, so don't ever do it.
Okay.
But when it's icy and snowy, you grab onto the back of the
Yes.
car and you go sliding around.
Hooky bob.
Oh,
It's like skitching, but for like your feet.
skitching.
Skitching is when skate hitching. It's when you're on a
yeah.
skate.
Yeah,
It's Marty
exactly.
McFlying.
How did you two manage to survive to get to this age?
Poor,
All right.
poor risk analysis skills.
Yes, clearly.
Kyle, you got to bring this up. What do you find an izzard at the end of? At the end of your leg, at the end of an animal's tail, or at the end of the alphabet?
End of the alphabet.
End of the lizard.
It's at the end of the alphabet.
Oh, damn! Damn.
It's the letter Z.
Right.
So
Where does
here's-
that come from?
Just about all over, actually.
Really?
Here's a quote. His mother was a lady from A to Izzard.
Wow.
Now-
I've never heard of that before.
This is especially in places where Scottish English is a thing. Apparently, in Scottish English, it was known as an Ezard, and that turned into Izzard. But where did Ezard come from? Well, we think that it
Zed?
might have come from the French alphabet rhyme, where they say, X, Y, et Z. Ez, so the A got stuck onto it and turned into
And the
Izzard.
Scots and the French, they liked each other quite a lot.
They're like
no
this.
wonder Eddie Izzard likes doing stand-up in French. Oh, my
There we
goodness.
go.
There's the connection.
Yeah.
Well, you're both on 3. So I guess we need a tiebreaker.
Tiebreaker. Speed round. I'm not giving you any advantage on this one, Kylie.
When someone pungles, do they take a drink? Do they take a punch? Or do they pay up?
I reckon they pay up.
Take a drink.
They pay up! Congratulations, Ben.
I would love to be magnanimous in victory, but that is not my nature. Sucked in, Kylie!
Oh, well, you both did super well at a dialect that was not your own. Remember, you can listen to the DARE fieldwork recordings from the University of Wisconsin, including all the clips of Arthur the Rat.
They're so good.
But what's going to happen now?
Well, I mean, I guess like a lot of science that loses funding, it just gets warehoused.
You're absolutely right. It is going to be warehoused. Apparently, they've been trying to squeak by on royalties, gifts. There's been volunteers doing this. They were able to publish some updates now and then, but now they're going to be laying off staff. Apparently, according to the article, hundreds of boxes of files are going to the University of Wisconsin archives.
Well, let's not forget that there will still be people doing dialectology. Like, for example, Jack Grieve is doing a lot of great work on Twitter by looking at the words that come up there. And, you know, using the digital approach, you can find stuff that maybe you would miss otherwise.
True.
And it can always lay the basis for other people's work out there. It's still there as a useful reference that might inspire future study in other fields.
And we'll always have the 6-volume set, which I am sorely tempted to get a copy of each one of them.
Do it.
Oh, that'd be so
They're really expensive.
Yeah, it's fine. What are you going to buy? Like a
Come
fancy
on, people.
dining table? If you want to ruminate on how you can better fund Daniel's crack book habit, then you can do that while you also ask us a question. studio@rtrfm.com.au.
We're available on the phone, 9260-9210.
And of course, we will always be on the Facebook page and Twitter. We are at TalkRTR. But now let's listen to a track. And this one is Girl Pal with Dare on RTRFM 92.1.
We're yummying down on yet more Creole. No, I'm not talking about delicious food morsels. We're talking about actual Creoles this week, again, on Talk the Talk.
Remember how a little while ago we did a show about West African pigeon?
Yes.
That was really interesting.
It was really cool.
And let's review what we know about pigeons and Creoles. What are they?
A pigeon is when more than one language group come together and it's messy and it's hard and whatever kind of floats to the top as a working system of communication in that community of many different languages coming together, that's a pigeon.
Essentially, you're taking the dominant language that might be by the group that has come to the particular region and it's mixing up with the indigenous language of the region and therefore used as a quick way for everyone to communicate with each other.
Yeah, and that's the really important thing, right? That pigeons aren't full languages. They're just like cobbled together systems just to get by.
Often very utility focused.
Yes.
I have this thing, you have that thing, let's exchange things.
Yeah.
Now, here's the big question. How do we get Creoles?
That's when you have generation differences, when you have the next generation of kids and it becomes way more comfortable for them to use it in communication terms.
Well, they just bring grammar to it.
Yeah. They
Right.
start standardizing.
Yeah.
That's what we said in that episode, and that's what I've always learned, and that's what I've always taught in my classes. But according to a new paper in Nature by Damin Blasi, Suzanne Maria Michaelis, and Martin Haspelmath, everything we just said about Creoles is wrong.
Oh, good. I love being wrong.
Awesome. We are learning stuff here.
Well, I think so too. But as you can imagine, this paper has caused a bit of an explosion in the world of Creole languages and linguistics generally, because, you know, linguists for the last couple of weeks have been just talking about this and saying, what does this mean?
Why, but I thought a different thing, and now you're telling me it's not right.
The paper's called Grammars Are Robustly Transmitted Even During the Emergence of Creole Languages. But I think that's going to need a little bit of explanation.
Yeah, because it's a little bit more dense.
So it's pretty obvious that Creoles pull their words from the dominant language.
Sure.
For example, here's a story that I just got recently on BBC Pidgin. Remember, this is written in a totally different language with its own grammar, but you can still understand it. Scientists for the United States don't come up with antibody way go attack 99% of HIV strains. That na almost all the type of HIV way the world. And this one fit bring new way to treat or prevent the deadly virus.
Yep. I follow that.
Okay.
I would imagine at speed with like some really Afrobeat jangly tune behind it, it would be a bit harder, but for the most part, yeah, I'm on board.
You can tell that this is totally pulling in lots and lots of English words.
Sure.
But where does the grammar come from?
Well, I guess that's what this article is attempting to address.
That's it. Now, for a pidgin, the grammar is just as simple as put one word next to another word and
figure it out.
You got it.
Yeah.
But for Creoles, it's a little bit harder to tell where the grammar comes from. I always heard this idea from Derek Bickerton that all Creoles kind of resemble each other. And so what happens is people sort of take these pidgins and beef them up in ways that human brains find easy to understand.
And would this have been a kind of handball in the direction of universal grammar?
Yeah.
Like the idea that well, if we can see all of these pidgins turning into really similar sorts of Creoles along a generational gap, well, badoy, clearly grammar is in the brains of kids and they're just being making a language as I go.
There's an underlying meaning for it all, and we can map that.
Yeah, Bickerton calls it a bioprogram.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
But
I
feel a big hairy butt coming.
Here it comes.
Oh no, this is not a good visual.
Damin Blasi says no. They just pick up the grammar from their parent languages. That's what
As
they
in
do.
all of them. And the mix is just the mix, right? However it mixes is however it mixes.
That's it.
Huh. That seems unsatisfying, doesn't it?
So this paper makes 3 basic claims, and if I were to paraphrase them, it would be something like this. Number 1, Creoles pick up where their parent languages left off.
Okay.
It's not a bioprogram.
Right.
Number 2, we don't have any evidence for pidgins turning into Creoles, not really.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. So they're
call.
just jumping straight into what is Creole.
There was never a bottleneck, an impoverished stage. It just kept on going.
There's just a linear line of language development from proto-language to language.
And not only that, the third claim is there isn't really anything about a Creole language that you can point to and say, aha, you're a Creole.
Oh, so it's the classic, is that a dialect or is that a language kind of thing?
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, so I had the chance to speak with the author, Damin Blasi, and
Awesome.
I mentioned that this paper gives quite a different picture of Creole origins than I've ever seen before.
Absolutely. I think this comes from the Bickertonian line of research, when we used to believe that these extremely simple and restricted communication codes, namely the pidgins, with time, perhaps within one generation, will receive all of the extra luxurious techniques and technologies that define a regular natural language. And that would be just a result of something that speakers add up to the language.
Now, I'm a little bit curious. You mentioned Bickerton's hypothesis, and I'm not really sure what that is. My understanding is that Bickerton had the idea that we have a bioprogram, like a language bioprogram, where if Creoles resemble each other in some ways, that's because that's what human brains do with language. Have I got that right?
What he says is that humans are endowed with the possibility of constructing a language out of very limited amount of linguistic material. So if you're a child and the only input that you get is a pitching, then you just leave your brain to do the rest, and it will come up with all of the things that you usually find in natural languages, like relative clauses, conventionalized grammatical rules, and all. And his point about Creoles was that actually you do find that they are very similar to each other, and those similarities are just a byproduct of the fact that the bioprogram is the same across humans. So it's a species-wide property.
I think I understand where the vocabulary of a Creole comes from. It comes from what we call the lexifier language. It's usually the dominant language, like English, and it's easy to see how a lot of Creoles, are English-based, and that's where they get their words from. But I never really understood where they get the grammar rules from. And so I guess a lot of people have said, oh, well, the younger generation takes the pidgin and beefs it up into a Creole, and they just do it in ways that human brains do. But your explanation is a little bit different. Like, let's say that there's some people speaking language A and language B, they get together and they put together a pidgin. Let's say a Creole arises from the contact with people in language A and language B. They'll get their vocabulary from the dominant language C, but they'll pull their grammar from kind of A and B together?
Yeah. So I think that perhaps the first thing we should do is to condense what is the argument that involves pitching in the genesis of Creoles. You have a bunch of languages, among them the lexifier or lexifiers, the languages that provide most of the vocabulary, and then the substrates which, depending on the account you decide to adopt, they provide more or less of the grammar. And that context situation leads to the production of a pitching, which I insist is not a full-fledged natural language. It's a very restricted communication code that lacks a lot of properties of natural languages. And then Creoles develop out of pitchings. At least this is what it's being argued there. Now, what we did then is to say, all right, what happens if we compare the properties of Creoles against the properties of broadly defined categories of ancestry? So we know that some Creoles were lexified by Germanic languages, and some others were Roman languages, and some others from other lexifiers in return. So then we ask, do we find any association between these variables? Is it true, for instance, that, say, word order in a Creole depends on the category they belong to in terms of the lexifier? Is it true that, say, Romans lexified Creoles are more likely to have this word order in comparison to Creoles that depend on a Germanic lexifier, and so on?
In other words, you're asking, let's look at these Creoles. Do they seem to have a lot in common with the languages that they came from? Or do they all kind of resemble each other in a way that we'd see if Bickerton was right?
Exactly. So, and what we find is that across the board of the lot of grammatical features, there is a clear association between the ancestral group of a Creole and the property it has, which means that proposing that there is contact, then there comes a pitching that has no structure whatsoever, and then the pitchings end up gaining the same structure that was present before them. It seems not a very economic solution. Why don't you just say, well, actually what happens is that Creoles simply continue these properties directly from the grammar, from the ancestry, sorry.
In other words, Creoles pretty much take up where their parent languages leave off.
Exactly. And this is consistent with the fact that we don't have a lot of evidence for pitchings apart from a few cases. We have a relatively good documentation for the origins of top pitching and Hawaiian pitching as well. That could have been the case that they end up developing to Creoles. That's discussable, but there's a lot of evidence that might point in that direction. But it's not true that all of the Creoles out there come from pitchings, and this association needs to be explained. So if someone said Creoles are better of pitchings, then you have to explain this awkward coincidence between the structure of the Creoles and the languages that came before them.
Yeah, okay. So that's one of the things that blew my mind about this work is the idea that, whoa, wait a minute, maybe Creoles don't start from pigeons. I mean, a few do. We know of a few where they certainly do, but by and large, Creoles don't start from pigeons. That's kind of interesting.
Absolutely. I think that, to me personally, the most interesting takeaway message that goes beyond the field of Creolistics is that if we take for granted the accounts of the emergence of Creole situations that were really extreme, slaveries, lot of abuse, very little access to any formal education, then it's really amazing to see that humans end up still learning grammar from their environment. This is not trivial at all. I mean, I'm a non-native speaker, and I'm still struggling with lots of pieces of English, and I speak English all day long. So think about these people in extremely adverse situations that end up learning all of these bits of very complex grammar out of the ancestral languages. That tells us that we are really good at learning languages after all.
That's Damin Blasi from the University of Zurich and the Max Planck Institute.
I'm hearing a lot of Occam's razor there, quite frankly.
It would be weird for it to go down to a pigeon and then back up to a structure that is exactly the same as what there was before.
Yeah, why multiply complications beyond a straightforward example? So that's why it's starting to resonate with me, that.
Now, notice how he does say, we do know of some Creoles that arose from pigeons, talk Pisin, Hawaiian, but they're kind of in the minority.
Right. So then how come Topisin or Hawaiian pigeon defies that trend? Why did they have a definitive pigeon and then a definitive Creole?
That's a really good question, and I want to hang on to that question because next week we're going to see somebody else who's going to answer it a different way.
Putting a pin in Ben Ainsley's question.
But one of the implications of this is that Creoles and other kinds of non-Creole languages, there's not much difference.
Right.
Okay, so let's take a track now.
Okay.
When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the political implications of what Damin Blasi is doing.
Bum, bum, bum.
Since we're talking about how languages start, I wanted to get the party started with Gui Borato on RTR FM 92.1.
So we're all sitting here, just with our minds blown wide open by this new study that's basically like, pigeons turn into Creoles along a generational divide. Psh, hold my drink, bro. I'm about to disprove the heck out of this nonsense.
I wish my department was like that. That sounds like fun.
We've been talking to researcher Damin Blasi about his recent study in Nature that used big data techniques to look at Creole languages and non-Creole languages and found, there's not much difference. Well, we know that Creole languages arrived from situations of slavery and colonialism and oppression.
But not uniformly, right? There have been
always.
migratory pressures or other reasons why populations could come together.
Sometimes.
I don't want to give our listeners the impression that only colonialism caused, because that would do a disservice to a bunch of Creoles that probably exist out there.
But because a lot of them do arise out of these awful conditions, when people start talking about Creoles, things get political really fast.
Yep.
I can imagine.
And one of the conclusions from this paper, like we mentioned, is that Creoles form just like other languages, and there isn't really anything that you can point to about a Creole language and say, oh, yeah, that's a Creole. They form just like other languages. They don't go through some sort of impoverished pigeon stage. And people like to hear this kind of thing because, it seems like an affirmation of Creole languages, which I quite like, actually. So I spoke with Damin Blasi, co-author of the paper, about this aspect of his work.
Actually, this is one of the things that I like the most about our results. So originally, what I expected to see was features that could be traced back to cognitive demands or communicative pressures. But then we ended up finding that wasn't the case. Now, the good conclusion that comes from this is that there is no reason from a political point of view to distinguish Creoles from non-Creoles in terms of education or anything like that. I have heard stories, and I have from speakers of Creole languages themselves, that in some countries people are discouraged to learn Creole, and they are suggested they should go for the big languages. You should learn English, you should learn French, whereas the Creoles are systematically regarded as inferior varieties of language. Now, obviously, there's no linguistic support for this idea. So next time someone comes out and say we should not teach Creoles in schools because of this and that, I'd say doesn't make any sense.
Hey, that's actually maybe a way that we could tell a Creole from a non-Creole. If people discriminated against it, it's a Creole.
Yes, yeah, exactly. As I said, this is a notion that has some aspects are scientific and that can be pinned down, but then they get confused and mixed. So
let's talk about the political stuff, because one thing that I've noticed, this is, we've talked twice now, and I'm noticing the same thing with both times. The research says something, it makes claims and it draws conclusions. But behind the research, there's also a story. And because the research fits into a story or a discussion that people are having, and sometimes the story can be a big one. It can be as important as the research itself. The story I'm noticing here with this paper is that people are arguing about whether Creoles are unique or whether they're just like other languages. And I think that it is very appealing to say, hey, you guys, Creoles are just like everyone else, right? Mm-hmm. And so your paper is, I think, being eagerly taken up by people who want to say, yeah, Creoles, no big deal, just like any other language.
Absolutely. I think that the motivations that might move people to accept or not accept the message that we're proposing, in many cases, might be completely independent from the scientific evidence. And the other side would have been the same thing, right? If I have said Creoles are completely different, they are not as anything we know as a natural language, then some people, perhaps with the wrong motivations, would have embraced that very eagerly. But as we discussed last time, right, like everyone's trying to see what fits their agenda. So I think that interesting scientific discussions will take place once all of the emotional and political part is worn out and people don't care about this anymore. Then they say, okay, let's go back to the paper. What did the paper say? Right. I end up finding that I agree myself with many of the people that propose a more radical Creole profile on certain aspects, and disagreeing with some aspects of the people that propose that they're just regular Creoles. I think that perhaps this binarization of the situation actually is obscuring the fact that there are lots of nuanced differences, and it's more or less a continuum rather than two separate positions.
Are you getting any heat for this?
It's very hard not to, right? After our conversation last time, I knew one thing, which is I want to have complete control on the press release and the things that are being said, at least officially. So we work quite a lot with Suzanne and Martin, the co-authors, on the press release. We try to have something that it's faithful, but still conveys the message that might be completely alien for people that were not exposed to the discussion of Creoles before. And all of the things that get attention get some people that are not happy with that. I have to say that my experience with the Creolistic field is that these are really nice people and they're super open to talk about things. I even exchanged a number of emails with people that don't agree with me, but they were really civil and nice. And perhaps this is because Creolistics, it's a rather small field. Right, so if you know everyone around you, then it's just you have an extra motivation for being a nice person, right? You don't want to be the grumpy guy that no one speaks to in the conferences. So, but I have to say that the backlash was much lesser than with previous studies of mine. I'm not doing this on purpose. I was
going to say, are you stepping into this on purpose? What are you doing, man?
Yeah. To me, the reason why I end up being involved in this big questions about language have to do with the fact that I didn't start as a linguist. So on my first exposure to the problems of linguistics, obviously when you're getting into a field, you don't have enough training to be interested in small issues. Like my original background is in physics. And on first year physics, everyone wants to understand where time comes from, what is the essence of universe and things like that. But after 5 years of training, then you become in love with relatively small problems like the properties of one material under pressure, etc., etc. And that happens to everyone. Like we all end up being professionalized. But since I didn't have those 5 years of linguistic training, I went to linguistics with this fresh interest on the big questions, and that's the kind of stuff that I've been doing, that I did back in the day. These days, I'm working on much smaller things, so it's very likely that the chance of us having interviews in the future will decrease.
Aww.
And you won't be they won't be reading about my research in those outlets.
Possibly our last interview with Damin Blasi from the University of Zurich and the Max Planck Institute.
He better not go into hiding.
I know.
That much. Oh.
No, not going into hiding. He's just gently coasting into academic middle age.
Damien's work has pleased a lot of people, but it's attracted attention from some people who disagree. And they say that Creoles really do have a different path of origin from other languages, and that this is what makes them interesting.
And so now we've got to contend with the reality of really significantly upturning the apple cart on sort of agreed knowledge in linguistics.
Not so fast.
Oh, God damn it.
Because not all Creolists agree.
Ah.
And
also, pause.
Yes.
Let's just acknowledge Creolist. What a great name.
I know. So when we get back together again next time for our next episode, we are going to talk to
the opposing side.
John McWhirter. He's chief.
He does a podcast too.
He does. He's on Lexicon Valley. If you are a Creolist, we would love to hear from you in the weeks and months to come. This discussion isn't over yet.
Absolutely.
But now let's take a track, and this one is Martin Courtney. He's from Real Estate. This one is called Before We Begin on RTR-FM 92.1.
And we have been traveling the world, ladies and gentlemen. We have gone to the far corners of the dark parts of this fair globe to find the most interesting, the most wild, the most incredible words of the week.
I'm not sure if we're Joseph Conrad or one of those horrific sci-fi stories now.
Well, there was one word this week that went absolutely nuts, and I'm sure you'll have no trouble.
I don't consume any news, basically.
You're too busy.
Yeah. The word is dotard.
Doted?
Yeah.
Dotard.
Dotard.
Dotard?
Dotard.
Yeah.
You guys are going to have to fill me in. I missed the Facebook maelstrom that must have emerged around this.
If you're in your dotage, aren't you a dotard? Is that what it means?
That is exactly right.
What is someone being in their dotage?
Well, in common use, you might hear people refer to it in, is this, am I in the radio? Hello, people! Hello! Are you out there? Save me! They won't let me out of this red box!
Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un are at it again.
Right.
At the United Nations General Assembly, Trump referred to the leader of North Korea as Rocket Man.
The Rocket Man.
Always a good move. Mm-hmm. But it turns out that Mr. Kim referred to Mr. Trump as the mentally deranged U.S. dotard.
Dotard. So, to be clear here, glorious leader has such a command of English, or at least someone in that state does, that they were able to portmanteau dotage into dotard.
No. Dotard's a real word.
It's a real word. It's been around for a while.
It was in Shakespeare. Much Ado About Nothing, Leonato says, I speak not like a dotard or a fool.
Wait, hang on. So this word is not an ableist like slur.
Well, it kind of is. I mean, if
It's
somebody's...
often referred to someone in their dotage, so in their later years, and they're not quite,
But it is the
mentally
same.
able as
Does
they
it come
used
from
to
the
be.
same word as retard?
No.
Dotard.
That tard ending is a coincidence. I love the word dotage, by the way. I never heard it until I came to Australia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't really hear it much.
No, I mean, you can say that we dote on someone.
Yes, that I hear.
Which means you care for someone. So when you're in your dotage, someone has to care for you.
Right.
And then you are a dotard.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting. So I can see where... So you don't emphasize the tard, really, do you? It's like doted.
Yes.
And I want to be really clear here. I'm not saying that this is a good word to throw around. I just was trying to really knuckle down
Well, it's probably
where this word came
why
from.
the North Koreans were using it in the first place. It's like, zing, get you, Mr. So-called Rocket Man.
It's not that they have such a great command over English. It's just that, they wanted to look up a Korean word to insult the U.S. president.
Right.
And then came up with that, but in the dictionary, but with no idea of the context or the frequency or anything like that. It's a super common ESL error. This is the kind of thing that ESL students do all the time.
Right, so they just bring out this they blow the dust off this insane word fossil, and then just like, yes, verily, I do, and you're just like, no, no.
I say good day, sir. I say good day. Yeah, that's not how we insult people.
Can I just say, so I learned something really funny a while ago. This was something that in the Korean War, there were some American soldiers that got captured. Have you heard this story?
No.
They were forced to do this, make a recording of them denouncing the USA and praising dear leader of North Korea. So they decided to have a little bit of fun with this. So they used all these low-frequency words that mean the right things, but which sound wrong. So, for example, there's a word in English, paean. Paean, P-A-E-A-N. And what is it?
Wait, you just said there's a word in English.
It's an English word.
Yeah,
Paean.
Yeah, it's worship. It's involving worship.
It's a hymn of praise, or
Yeah.
to praise or to worship.
Yeah.
So they said, instead of saying paean, they said peon. We peon, dear leader. We peon North Korea.
Ah, right. Classic.
It was great. And of course, there was nothing that North Koreans could say because when they looked in their dictionary, there it was. The only bad thing was that I think Life magazine reported on this while they were still in North Korea, so that wasn't a big deal.
Okay, so doted.
That's one.
One.
Trump, for his part, referred to the country of Namibia. Is this a place you've heard of?
It's in
Is
Africa.
he talking about Namibia?
I think he might be. Or perhaps he's...
Zambia?
Perhaps he's conflating it with Zambia.
Oh, God, you really just kind of wish that the person who was in control of the world's largest nuclear arsenal had spent more than 5 minutes with Atlas in their life.
I can understand making that mistake if it's a country you've never heard of before, but the thing about being the U.S. president is that you're kind of supposed to have heard of these things, don't you know?
Yes, because you can more or less invade any of them whenever you want.
We posted a graphic on our Facebook page, and I'm going to do this in my sultry voice. All natural Namibian kafefe. Made with 100% confusion. James on Facebook said, as a coffee snob, what's the flavor profile of Namibian kafefe?
I would call it very inky. James.
Would you?
It would have a very inky follow through.
Very good for the dotard in your life.
He says either rich with bitter undertones or insipid and with a clear indication of having water that was too hot added at the wrong time, methinks.
Oh, yeah. Zing.
A bit overheated, I'd say.
Yep.
Let's go on to the next one, our final word of the week, but this one's kind of a multi-word expression. Taking a knee.
Oh, I've heard about this all the time.
What is this?
To take a knee is basically like it's sport lingo, essentially. You come in during quarter time or half time or whatever it is, and the coach says, "All right, boys, take a knee." And then everyone gets down on one knee and they get delivered some kind of sermon about how you need to scrimmage more points in the ballywog.
Yeah,
or whatever.
I attended Notre Dame in the US.
I know a lot of
sports
sports ball.
Yeah.
Taking a knee is also a play that you can do when you're trying to run out the clock.
In gridiron.
Yes. You receive the ball and then you just sort of take a knee, downing the play and wasting time.
Yeah. I've seen that happen too. We were like, why are you running?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tactic, is it?
When you
I don't
come,
understand this
When you
game.
come from AFL, also known as run, struggle, cuddle, like throw the ball.
Trump is angry because football players in the States are taking a knee
during the national anthem.
That's the one.
Well, okay, so this is different though, I thought, because wasn't it like when I first heard about this, it wasn't taking a knee, at least it wasn't phrased that way, it was just not standing up.
Yep.
Right? So it's changed from not standing to taking a knee.
And protesting in this way. Protesting police brutality. NFL player Colin Kaepernick did it and has been pretty much stricken from the NFL.
Right.
Yeah. So the hashtag that's trending is hashtag take a knee.
Take a knee. All right, I dig it. Well, I mean, I do, but I also don't, because I feel like it's just another bit of noise in the giant siloed pie that is the world we live in.
And yet, it is important to protest injustice and extrajudicial killings.
The taking a knee thing, I think, is great. The hashtag take a knee thing, I'm like, well, I guess a whole bunch of people who agree with me are going to see that.
Well, maybe.
Yeah. But that's okay. What else do we have?
People who agree with each other need to signal to each other.
That's true.
Choirs need to be sung to.
No,
Isn't it the other way around? Don't choirs have to sing to people?
Yeah, but you also have to know the words and learn the words. And it might come across as slacktivism, but sometimes even just realising you're not alone might make you get off the couch and go out and be a part of the rally.
I hope so.
Which is why I sometimes do engage with people I disagree with. Because, I'm not trying to convince them.
Because you might just be spreading the message to the Red Book.
That's it.
Shall we finish on a track?
Yeah, what do you want? Thundercat or Pet Shop Boys?
Pet Shop Boys.
Pet Shop Boys.
Let's listen to Pet Shop Boys with I'm With Stupid on RTR FM 92.1.
Well, this stupid guy has to get out of here, but these stupid people are going to hang around. If you have any questions, you want to talk about Creoles or our words of the week, do get in touch. Talk the talk at rtrfm.com.au.
Give us a call, especially if you're someone who's recently paid your pledge. You've still got time. 9260-9210. Come on, support RTR.
Ditto that. And you can also get in touch with us on Facebook or Twitter at TalkRTR. The wonderful Pet Shop Boys with I'm With Stupid on RTR FM 92.1, where you're here in the closing minutes of Talk the Talk with Daniel and Kylie.
We have to stop dancing, unfortunately.
I'll stop dancing when I feel like.
Okay, you keep on moving, man.
We got lots and lots of great comments and questions. Tristan via email says, "Hey team, love the show.
Hi.
My output of work between 11 and 12 on a Tuesday is dubious at best." Shout out to all the people listening at work. "Is there any evidence of divergence in dialect or accent between North and South Korea since the split after World War II?"
Good question.
Yeah. We know that accents and even different languages happen when people are separated from each other, and that's one heck of a separation. The answer is yes, in lots of ways. For example, spelling. Some of the characters are now spelled differently. Words. South Korea brings in a lot more English loanwords. And also even some pronunciation. And so now there's a new smartphone app called Univoca, which is intended to help speakers of the two varieties bridge those gaps.
Oh, if only there was more bridges going on, that would be awesome. But
Wouldn't it?
that's fascinating. Wow.
Ben on Facebook says, "Just listen to the newest episode, and the markdown on Facebook is actually a huge problem for me. Remember how if you put tildes on either side of something, it's not tildes anymore, it's strike through?
Yeah.
And now people are saying, but I wanted tildes.
Yeah.
My tribe's language, Dene, depends on the tilde as an independent character within our orthography. And right now, one of the best things our language revitalization has going for it is that a lot of younger people have picked it up for texting and messaging with friends. Facebook really ought to have left a way to escape out these characters or something for those who really need it. Then Ben continues, never mind, just finished the episode, and a great tip from Andrew, that is to say, put spaces everywhere.
Thank you, Noisy Andrew. That was awesome.
But I asked, does that work for Danae? And he said, while it's not perfect, its function is to signal that the previous vowel is nasalized, so it should work.
Oh, that's great. See, there you go. Talk the talk, listeners, solving the problems of the world. That's great.
We're crowdsourcing all the problems.
Yeah. Ilias says that they agree with neither Kylie or Ben in regards to how time is talked about. They have very strong feelings about this. Lived most of their life outside of Philadelphia for the past 4 years in Chicago. My gut reaction is moving an event forward is pushing it away from us. But if someone didn't clarify, I'd say, can we push that forward to Sunday? I say, okay, well, what does that mean? I feel mostly like the opposite of moving something back later is not moving it forward, but moving it up.
Up.
We're going in a different direction altogether. I was surprised when you didn't mention this as an alternative. Curious if this is clearer or some sort of regionalism others don't use. So, yeah, what do you all think? I mean, moving forward, backwards, let's move it up.
I guess that makes sense because
down.
up on a calendar is pretty unambiguous.
Move it up. Oh.
Forward is just a weird word. Can I just say that forward is like, let's just pretend that I'm standing here and you're standing there and you're facing in the same direction I am, but you're just a little bit forward. Kylie, move forward.
Okay, I would move away from you in the direction that you're looking, in the direction I'm looking.
Okay, now imagine a different situation where we're facing each other. Kylie, move forward.
I would move towards you.
See,
shoot.
This is the thing, right? Forward doesn't mean any particular direction. It's based on how you're standing. As
say in Ender's Game, the enemy's gate is down. And then suddenly your perspective changes completely when it comes to battle.
I never read Ender's Game.
Oh, dude. Well, I'm going to give you a good list of great science fiction books now.
I have a personal thing against Orson Scott Card.
That might be a reason, yeah.
Alessio
check out the movie. It gives you a better idea.
Okay. Alessio on Facebook has a comment about our discussion of T and V pronouns, where the tu is familiar and the vu is distant, and how to translate them into English. On our last show, I mentioned two ways. You could use the dusty old thou and you, or you could use body language like putting a hand on someone's arm.
Yes, I remember you mentioned that.
Alessio says, I studied translation from Italian into English, and the most effective way I can think of would be, unsurprisingly, through language. Example, I want to ask formally, do you want tea? But the you carries no actual meaning in English, so the easiest way would be rephrasing it so the whole sentence, rather than one word, carries the sense of formality. I would say, would you like a cup of tea? Mm-hmm. By contrast, I could make it sound informal by saying, do you want a cuppa?
That's what I think is the answer for translators whenever I watch movies. You'll suddenly see this particular scene become quite colloquial and you're like, hang on, they're not using Aussie slang. No, but we're trying to convey a sense of informality that's going on here.
I get it, and yet I wonder if it would be so striking when you need a quick turnaround.
And also if these informalities and use of particular freight might be cross-cultural. Yeah.
Mike, via email, wants to talk about language policing, because we did our show about whether language policing is language snobbery. He says, I appreciate that in a lot of cases we are probably really criticizing someone because their use of English isn't standard, possibly because they didn't have the opportunity to learn the finer points of the language. In a lot of cases, the difference doesn't matter. They're still getting the meaning across. I think there's a need to be careful that we aren't reinforcing this snobbery by saying, it's not standard English, but that's okay. You don't know any better. And
so careful about being patronizing.
That is icky, isn't it? Yeah. And, we could have this reverse language attitude. I know that person's wrong, but I'll treat this underling with respect. Maybe instead we could say, hey, this person is marking something about their identity. They're showing me something about their linguistic world, and that's really cool. Also, another point and a personal source of annoyance. What's your view on the deliberate use of non-standard English like product or trade names using non-standard spelling? Things like straps, dog treats, whiskas, cat food, and low-carb foods with no W. How about when this is used in products that are marketed to children who are likely to assume that this is the correct spelling? Some businesses have the nerve to complain about declining literacy skills in young people applying for work with them. Any ideas?
Oh, you just get reinforced what's the correct way and which way is advertising. We see it through practice all the time. And I think they get the idea that there's different context.
I think so too. Cookie Monster speaks in non-standard English, but kids don't walk around saying that, because we know that he's a monster. He's blue. He eats cookies. And
Me a cookie!
they'll get more evidence. Kids will get more evidence for the right way of doing it than for the wrong way.
Yeah, if a small child runs up to me, me want cookie! Yeah, you're not getting a cookie, dude. Ask nicely.
You would withhold the cookie.
I would say take off the blue suit. Stop freaking me out.
Well, we need to go.
We do. We've got out to lunch. The awesomeness.
With Mark Neal, who's going to
Yeah.
be playing us loads of great tunes. But I would like to remind you, please get your pledges in. If you're one of the people that pledged for Radiothon and hasn't quite made it to the page yet, go to rtrfm.com.au. We'll be back next week with yet another episode. You ready?
Yeah.
It's going to have John McWhorter. It's going to be awesome. Until then, keep talking.
This has been an RTRFM podcast. RTRFM is an independent community radio station that relies on listeners for financial support. You can subscribe online at rtrfm.com.au/subscribe.
Our theme song is by R Trees, and you can check out their music on rtrees.com and everywhere good music is sold.
We're on Twitter at TalkRTR. Send us an email, talkthetalk@rtrfm.com.au. And if you'd like to get lots of extra linguistic goodies, then like us on Facebook or check out our Patreon page. You can always find out whatever we're up to by heading to talkthetalkpodcast.com.